On my 70th birthday, my millennial daughter called me technologically illiterate and told me I was holding back her generation. Just a heated argument between a mother and daughter. Or so I thought, until I discovered she'd been draining my retirement accounts for months, and that was only the beginning. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. I never imagined that learning to use modern technology would become the weapon my own daughter would use against me. But there I was, sitting in my sunroom in Millbrook Heights on a crisp Thursday morning in March, staring at my tablet screen while numbers danced before my eyes. Numbers that told a story I wasn't prepared to believe. Numbers that were far smaller than they should have been. My name is Eleanor Whitmore, and at 70 years old, I've weathered more storms than most people see in 2 lifetimes. I buried my husband Charles when I was 58, raised 2 daughters mostly on my own after that, and built a small but successful interior design consultancy that kept us comfortable. When people my age complain about technology passing them by, I remind them that I learned to use CAD software in my 60s and mastered online client portfolios when most of my contemporaries were still fumbling with flip phones. But to my younger daughter Vivienne, none of that progress mattered. At 29 she possessed that particular strain of millennial superiority that treats anyone over 50 like a relic from the Stone Age. Every conversation we had about technology became a lecture about my supposed limitations, delivered with the patience one might show a confused child. The confrontation that started everything happened 3 weeks before my birthday. I'd called Vivienne about helping me set up a video conference with my older daughter Rebecca, who lives in Charleston with her family. Rebecca had just gotten a promotion to partner at her law firm, and I wanted to celebrate properly with a virtual dinner party, something I'd read about in Better Homes and Gardens. "Mom, it's literally just downloading an app," Vivienne had said, her voice dripping with that familiar condescension. "You don't need a tutorial for Zoom. Even grandparents figure this out." "I'm trying to learn, sweetheart," I told her, keeping my voice level despite the sting. "But these platforms seem to change their interfaces every few months." "That's exactly your problem," she interrupted. "You treat every tiny update like it's the end of the world." "It's 2024, Mom. Maybe if you spent less time complaining about how complicated everything is, and more time actually adapting, you wouldn't be so helpless." The word helpless hit me like a slap. I'd managed household finances since Charles died, learned new design software to stay competitive, and even figured out how to manage my investment accounts online when my broker retired. But to Vivienne, I was just another technologically challenged senior citizen stumbling through a digital world. "You know what your real issue is," she continued, warming to her favorite theme. "You're technologically illiterate. You act like learning new things is some impossible burden instead of just normal adult behavior. You need to accept that my generation has skills you don't, and stop pretending you can keep up." I gripped the phone tighter. "I've been adapting to new technology since before you were born, Vivienne. I learned computer design programs when they revolutionized my industry. I mastered online banking when," she laughed, but there was no warmth in it. "Right. Is that why you still print out your emails and file them in folders? Is that why you call me every time your Wi-Fi acts up? Mom, you're digital roadkill. The sooner you admit you're out of your league, the sooner someone competent can actually help you." Digital roadkill. The phrase echoed in my head long after she hung up abruptly, claiming she had an important meeting. I sat in my kitchen afterward, surrounded by the smart appliances I'd learned to program, the tablet I used for client presentations, and the wireless printer that connected seamlessly to all my devices, feeling every one of my 70 years. That conversation happened on February 16th. My birthday was March 9th. Vivienne didn't call. Rebecca did though, right at 8 a.m. as she always did on my birthday. We managed our video call perfectly. I'd figured out the conference software on my own, naturally, and spent nearly an hour catching up. Her twins had made me a digital birthday card, and she'd arranged for flowers to be delivered from her favorite Charleston florist. Near the end of our call, Rebecca asked if I'd spoken with Vivienne. Not since our argument last month, I admitted, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. Rebecca's expression darkened on the screen. That's strange. She texted me yesterday saying she had something special planned for your birthday. She mentioned wanting to make up for being such a witch last month, though she used more colorful language. Something special. I spent the rest of my birthday hoping for a call, a visit, even a text message acknowledging that her mother had survived another year. But my phone stayed silent, and my doorbell never rang. The next morning I decided to check my online banking while having my morning coffee, not because I suspected anything. I simply wanted to review my monthly expenses and see how much I'd spent on my birthday dinner at Chez Laurent. The balance that appeared on my screen made my coffee cup rattle against its saucer. My main checking account showed $1,247.89. It should have contained at least $4,500. I blinked hard, certain I was misreading the screen. Maybe the banking app hadn't loaded properly. Maybe I was looking at the wrong account. I closed the app and reopened it. The number didn't change. My hands trembling slightly, I navigated to the transaction history. There, scattered across the past 7 weeks, were electronic transfers I definitely hadn't authorized. They weren't large, $200 here, $275 there, but they were consistent. And they were all going to the same external account labeled Chen Whitmore External. Vivienne had hyphenated her last name after college, adding her boyfriend's surname in some complicated gesture toward modern feminism. She'd kept it even after they broke up, claiming it sounded more professional than plain Whitmore. I scrolled through the transactions with growing disbelief. January 18th, $225 to Chen Whitmore External. January 25th, $280 to Chen Whitmore External. February 1st, $195 to Chen Whitmore External. February 8th, $250 to Chen Whitmore External. February 15th, $310 to Chen Whitmore External. The pattern was clear and devastating. Small enough amounts that I might not notice them individually, especially since I typically reviewed my statements monthly rather than weekly. But together they represented a systematic drain on my accounts. I reached for my phone with shaking fingers and called Vivienne. It went straight to voicemail. That generic robot voice that millennials seem to prefer over personalized greetings. Vivienne, this is your mother. I need you to call me immediately. There are some financial transactions I need to discuss with you. It's urgent. I hung up and walked to my home office, a converted bedroom that Charles had helped me design years ago. My filing cabinets were organized by year and category, apparently a quaint habit according to my technologically superior daughter, and I pulled out my current banking folder. I compared the online transactions to my printed monthly statements. Every electronic transfer showed up exactly as I'd seen on screen. This wasn't a computer error or a banking glitch. Someone with access to my accounts had been systematically moving my money. My phone buzzed. A text from Vivienne. In back-to-back meetings today. What's the emergency? Can we talk tonight? Emergency. She thought this was some maternal overreaction. I typed back carefully. We need to discuss some unauthorized transactions from my checking account. When can you come over? Her response was swift. Unauthorized. Mom, you probably just forgot about some payments or auto debits. I'll swing by Sunday and help you figure out what you're confused about. Confused. There was that word again. I stared at my phone screen until the words blurred, then set it aside and called Millbrook Community Bank. The customer service representative, a patient young man named Daniel, listened as I explained the situation. Mrs. Whitmore, I can see the transfers you're referring to. They were all processed using your online banking credentials with proper authentication. Do you share your login information with anyone? My throat constricted. My daughter helped me update my password a few months ago when I was having trouble accessing the mobile app. I see. And the receiving account is registered to a Vivienne Whitmore. Would that be a family member? Yes, I whispered. My daughter Daniel's tone became more careful. Ma'am, if these transfers weren't authorized by you, you'll need to change your login credentials immediately and file a fraud report with our security department. I can transfer you now if you'd like. Fraud. The word felt alien in my mouth, impossible to associate with my own daughter. After hanging up with the bank, I sat in my office and looked around at the space where I'd built my business, managed my family's finances, and kept the careful records that had sustained us through good times and bad. The walls were lined with design portfolios, client photos, and awards from the Interior Design Society, evidence of a competent, successful woman who definitely wasn't technologically illiterate. My phone rang. Rebecca calling from Charleston. Mom, I just had the strangest conversation with Vivienne. She asked me if you'd been acting confused about money lately. She seemed worried you might be developing memory issues. A chill ran down my spine. Memory issues. She said you'd called her about some banking confusion, and she was concerned it might be the beginning of, well, you know, cognitive decline. She asked if I'd noticed any signs. I closed my eyes and felt the world tilt slightly. Vivienne wasn't just stealing from me. She was laying groundwork to discredit me if I tried to expose her. Rebecca, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course, Mom. Have you noticed any signs of confusion or memory problems when we talk? Rebecca was quiet for a moment. Mom, you're sharper than most people half your age. You remember details about my cases that I forget myself. You manage a business, maintain your home, and keep up with technology better than most of my friends. Why would you even ask that? I told her everything. The missing money, the unauthorized transfers, Vivienne's dismissive responses. Rebecca listened with the same focused attention she brought to legal briefs. When I finished, she was silent for a long time. Mom, she finally said, her lawyer voice taking over. You know what this looks like, don't you? Theft, I said quietly. Financial elder abuse. And if she's already trying to plant seeds about your mental competency, she's probably planning to claim you authorized the transfers but forgot about them. It's actually a common pattern. The clinical term hit me harder than the simple word theft had. Financial elder abuse. as if I were some helpless victim instead of a woman who'd successfully managed money for decades. What should I do? I asked. First, document everything. Every transaction, every conversation, every text message. Change all your passwords immediately. Then call David Patterson. You remember him from Charles's firm? He specializes in family financial crimes now. David Patterson. I remembered him as a young associate at Charles's law firm, eager and sharp. Now he was apparently dealing with children who stole from their parents. Rebecca, what if I'm wrong? What if there's some explanation? Her voice was gentle but firm. I've seen this in my practice. Financial abuse often starts with small amounts, tests the waters. The victim's first instinct is always to find innocent explanations because the alternative is too painful to accept. After we hung up, I walked through my house, the house where I'd raised both girls, where we'd had birthday parties and holiday gatherings and heart-to-heart talks about their dreams and fears. Every room held memories of Vivienne as a child, building pillow forts in the living room, helping me bake cookies in the kitchen, curled up in the den reading, while I worked on design projects. How do you reconcile those memories with bank statements showing systematic theft? I returned to my office and pulled out a fresh legal pad. Yes, I still use legal pads, despite what my technologically superior daughter thinks, and began documenting everything I could remember. Every conversation about technology, every dismissive comment, every instance where she'd helped me with online tasks. A pattern emerged that I hadn't seen before. Over the past 6 months, Vivienne had inserted herself into my digital life in small but significant ways. She'd helped me update my banking passwords. She'd fixed my Wi-Fi settings. She'd organized my online accounts for better security. Each time she'd made me feel grateful for her assistance while subtly establishing access to my financial information. The technologically illiterate mother, dependent on her savvy daughter's help. I called David Patterson. His secretary remembered me and put me through immediately. Eleanor, it's been too long. David's voice was warm with genuine affection. I was sorry I couldn't make it to Charles's memorial service, but I heard you gave a beautiful speech. Thank you, David. I'm calling because I need legal advice about a family matter. His tone shifted to professional concern. What's going on? I told him everything, reading directly from my notes to ensure accuracy. David listened without interruption, occasionally asking for clarification on dates or amounts. When I finished, he sighed deeply. Eleanor, I'm sorry to say this is becoming increasingly common. Adult children with financial pressures who view their parents' accounts as emergency funds. The technology angle makes it particularly insidious. They position themselves as helpers while actually establishing access for theft. Is there enough evidence to pursue this legally? Potentially. The transaction pattern is clear, and if she had unauthorized access to your banking credentials, that constitutes wire fraud at minimum. But Eleanor, you need to understand, this is your daughter. If we move forward, it becomes a criminal matter. Family relationships rarely survive that. I looked out my office window at the garden, where Charles and I had planted roses for each of the girls' births. Vivienne's yellow roses were blooming early this year, bright and cheerful against the morning light. What would you do, David? As your lawyer, I'd recommend gathering more evidence before making any decisions. As someone who knew your family, I'd say this breaks my heart, and I'm sorry you're facing this choice. After ending the call, I spent the rest of the day methodically changing every password on every account Vivienne had ever helped me with. Email, banking, investment accounts, even my streaming services. Each password change felt like closing a door she'd convinced me to leave open. That evening, I reviewed everything I'd documented. The timeline was damning. Vivienne's increasing criticism of my technological abilities, her offers to help with my accounts, the systematic transfers that began shortly after she'd gained access, and now her preemptive attempts to frame me as confused or declining. My phone rang at 8:30 p.m. Vivienne, hey mom. Sorry I couldn't call earlier. Crazy day at the office. What's this about unauthorized transactions? Her voice was casual, concerned but not alarmed. She really believed I was just a confused old woman who'd misunderstood something on her bank statement. I'd prefer to discuss it in person, I said. Can you come by tomorrow evening? Sure, but Mom, you sound worried about nothing. These things usually have simple explanations. Maybe your bank changed their interface, and you're reading the statements wrong. Or maybe you authorized some transfers and forgot about them. Maybe I forgot. There it was again. I'll see you tomorrow, Vivienne. Okay, but don't stress about this. I'll bring my laptop and we'll sort through everything. You know how confusing banking websites can be. After she hung up, I sat in my living room and looked at the framed photos covering the mantel. Vivienne at her college graduation, radiant with possibility. Vivienne at Rebecca's wedding, serving as maid of honor with tears of joy in her eyes. Vivienne last Christmas, helping me hang ornaments on the tree while we laughed about my terrible wrapping skills. Which version was real? The loving daughter in the photographs, or the woman who'd been systematically draining my accounts while calling me technologically illiterate? I walked to my computer and began a new document. Financial documentation. I formatted it carefully, with clear headings and chronological organization. If this was going to become a legal matter, I wanted records that would satisfy any court. By midnight I had 17 pages of documentation, transaction records, conversation summaries, timeline analyses, and copies of all relevant communications. It was the most thorough financial audit I'd ever compiled, and it painted a picture of calculated, systematic theft. I saved multiple copies on different devices and printed hard copies for my files. Then I sat back and acknowledged the truth I'd been avoiding all day. My daughter, the child I'd raised, educated and loved unconditionally, was stealing from me. She was using my trust and her technological skills against me, while simultaneously positioning me as too incompetent to understand what was happening. Tomorrow, she would come to my house expecting to find a confused elderly woman who needed help understanding her bank statements. Instead, she would find a 70-year-old woman who'd spent decades managing complex finances, who'd built and run a successful business, and who'd just compiled enough evidence to destroy her daughter's life. Vivienne thought I was technologically illiterate. She thought I was holding back her generation with my outdated ways. She thought she could steal from me, because old people don't pay attention to their money, right? She was about to learn that her illiterate mother understood something far more fundamental than technology consequences. And unlike the apps and platforms that seemed to change daily, consequences had operated by the same rules for millennia. I'd spent 3 weeks feeling hurt by her criticism of my technological skills. Now I realized those criticisms had been strategic, designed to undermine my confidence and make me more dependent on her help. Tomorrow evening, Vivienne would discover that her technologically challenged mother had spent the last 24 hours documenting her crimes with the precision of a forensic accountant. She'd learned that being comfortable with modern technology didn't make her immune to old-fashioned justice. I turned off my computer and walked through my house, checking locks and setting the alarm system, another piece of technology I'd mastered despite my alleged incompetence. As I climbed the stairs to my bedroom, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Charles' funeral, the cold, determined anger of a woman who'd been underestimated by someone who should have known better. Vivienne had made a critical error in judgment. She'd assumed that calling me names would make me doubt myself. Instead, it had made me pay closer attention to everything she did. By tomorrow night, she'd understand the difference between being technologically literate and being actually intelligent. And she'd learn that the most dangerous person in any room is often the one everyone assumes is harmless. My bedroom faced the garden where the yellow roses were blooming. As I pulled the curtains closed, I could smell their fragrance through the window screen, sweet and innocent, like the daughter I'd thought I knew. Tomorrow would be different. Tomorrow the real Vivienne would finally reveal herself, and I would be ready with documentation that would satisfy any judge or jury in the state. Sleep came easier than I'd expected. For the first time in weeks, I knew exactly what needed. The next evening, I set the dining room table for two, not because I expected this to be a pleasant family dinner, but because I wanted everything to look normal when Vivienne arrived. I placed my laptop at one end, closed but ready. Next to it, a manila folder containing 17 pages of printed documentation. Everything organized, cross-referenced, and damning. At exactly 7 p.m., I heard her car in the driveway. Through the front window, I watched Vivienne gather her oversized designer purse and laptop bag, tools of the modern professional, weapons of the technologically superior generation. She walked up my front path with the confident stride of someone coming to help a confused elderly relative sort through a simple misunderstanding. "Hi, Mom," she said when I opened the door, leaning in for our customary cheek kiss. She smelled like expensive perfume and the kind of coffee shop that charges $7 for a latte. "You look tired. Have you been worrying about this banking thing all day?" "Something like that," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. She glanced around the foyer, her eyes taking in the family photos, the antique console table, the traditional decor that she'd once described as Pinterest grandma chic. Everything about my home seemed to reinforce her narrative of the outdated mother who needed her daughter's modern expertise. "I brought my laptop," she announced, patting her bag. "We'll get this sorted out in no time." These banking websites can be so confusing for people who didn't grow up with computers. People who didn't grow up with computers. I'd been using computers for business since before she was born, but in Vivienne's world, anyone over 40 was technologically hopeless by default. "I've prepared some documentation," I said, leading her to the dining room. "I thought we should review everything systematically." She paused in the doorway, taking in the formal setup. Her confidence flickered for just a moment before returning full force. "Mom, you don't need to make this into such a big production. We're just going to log into your account and see what confused you." I took my seat at the head of the table and gestured for her to sit across from me. "Please, have a seat. I think you'll find this interesting." She settled into the chair, pulling out her laptop with practiced efficiency. "Okay, what exactly do you think is wrong? You mentioned unauthorized transactions, but I'm sure there's a simple explanation." I opened my laptop and turned it so she could see the screen. My banking homepage was already loaded, showing the current balance, $1,247.89. "This account should have approximately $4,500, I said calmly. Over $3,200 is missing. Vivienne leaned forward, her expression shifting to concerned daughter mode. Mom, are you sure you're reading this right? Sometimes the mobile app doesn't show pending transactions correctly, or maybe you forgot about some bills you paid. I don't use the mobile app for banking, I interrupted. I use the full website because it provides more detailed information, and I keep meticulous records of all my transactions. I opened the Manila folder and slid the first page across the table. These are all the unauthorized transfers from my account over the past 7 weeks. She glanced at the paper, and I watched her face carefully. The concern remained, but something harder flickered behind her eyes. Calculation, not confusion. Mom, these all show transfers to Eleanor Whitmore external. That's my account information. Yes, I said simply. It is. She stared at the page for a long moment. When she looked up, her expression had shifted into what I recognized as her professional problem-solving mode. The face she probably wore in client meetings when dealing with difficult situations. There must be some mistake, she said slowly. Maybe when I helped you update your online banking, something got cross-linked between our accounts. Technology glitches happen all the time. I slid the second page across the table. This is a timeline of every instance where you helped me with my online accounts over the past 6 months. Banking passwords, email security, investment account access, correlated with the dates when transfers began. Vivienne picked up the paper, her eyes scanning the detailed chronology. I watched her realize that I'd documented everything, not just the financial transactions, but every conversation, every offer of help, every dismissive comment about my technological abilities. Mom, this is, she started, then stopped. This looks like you think I deliberately stole from you. Did you? I asked. The question hung in the air between us. For a moment I saw something roar in her face, not the confident millennial or the concerned daughter, but something desperate and cornered. Then her expression hardened. I can't believe you're accusing me of theft. Do you hear yourself right now? This is exactly what I was talking about when I said you might be having cognitive issues. There it was, the ace she thought she had up her sleeve. I slid page 3 across the table. This is a record of your conversation with Rebecca yesterday, where you expressed concern about my supposed memory problems. Interesting timing, considering I hadn't mentioned any confusion to you directly. Vivienne's face went pale. You talked to Rebecca about this. She called to tell me about your concerns regarding my mental state. Apparently you were quite worried that I might be developing dementia. I kept my voice level, conversational, a convenient explanation for why I might be confused about money disappearing from my accounts. She set the paper down with shaking hands. Mom, I was genuinely worried about you. When you called about banking confusion, it reminded me of how Grandma started. Your grandmother never had banking confusion, I interrupted. She managed her own finances until she was 87. Try again. For the first time since she'd arrived, Vivienne looked genuinely rattled. She glanced at her laptop, then back at my documentation, as if trying to calculate her way out of this conversation. Even if there were some transfers which I'm sure have an explanation, why are you treating me like a criminal? I'm your daughter. Don't you trust me? I opened my laptop and turned it toward her again. Let's check that theory. I changed all my passwords yesterday after documenting the transfers. If these were honest mistakes or glitches, You shouldn't be able to access my accounts anymore, correct? She nodded slowly. So you won't mind if I ask you to log into my banking account right now and show me how these transfers might have happened accidentally? The silence stretched between us. Vivienne's fingers drummed against the table, a nervous habit she'd had since childhood. I don't remember your new passwords, she said finally. I didn't give you any new passwords. In fact, I haven't given you any passwords since the day you helped me update my security settings in October. Another silence, longer this time. Mom, she said, and for the first time her voice sounded young and uncertain. You don't understand the pressure I'm under. The economy, student loans, rent in the city. So you did take the money. She closed her eyes. It wasn't supposed to be permanent. I was going to pay it back as soon as my promotion came through. I just needed to bridge the gap for a few months. The admission hit me like a physical blow, even though I'd known it was coming. Hearing her confess made it real in a way that bank statements hadn't. How much? I asked. What? How much did you take? Total amount. She opened her laptop and began typing. Let me check my records. Vivienne, how much? Her shoulders sagged. $4,247 over the past 2 months. But Mom, I was keeping track of everything. I have it all documented so I could pay you back with interest. I slid page 4 across the table. According to my analysis, you've taken $4,783. Your math is off by over $500. She stared at the paper. That's not. I've been very careful about the amounts. Apparently not careful enough. I leaned back in my chair. Tell me about the promotion. What? The promotion you mentioned. The one that was going to allow you to pay me back. She shifted uncomfortably. It's been delayed. Budget issues at the firm. But it's definitely happening. Probably in the next quarter. Vivienne, I called your office yesterday. Spoke to Margaret in HR. You haven't been considered for any promotions. In fact, you received a written warning last month for excessive personal calls during work hours. Her face crumpled. You called my office. I wanted to understand the full picture before we had this conversation. I opened another page in my folder. Your credit report shows 3 maxed out credit cards, 2 missed car payments, and a collection notice for your student loans. The financial pressure you mentioned isn't temporary. It's been building for over a year. She stared at the credit report printout, as if it were written in a foreign language. How did you get this? You authorized me as an emergency contact on your financial accounts when you moved to the city. I still have access for my own protection, something I learned to set up after your father died. I paused, something that required quite a bit of technological competence to arrange properly. The weight of what I'd discovered seemed to settle on her shoulders. She looked around my dining room as if seeing it clearly for the first time. The organized documentation, the systematic presentation, the careful preparation that had gone into this confrontation. You're not confused at all, she whispered. No, I said. I'm not. And you're not technologically illiterate. I've been managing digital finances and running online business operations since before you graduated college. I learned these systems because I needed them, not because someone younger showed me how to use them. She put her head in her hands. Oh God, what have I done? I felt a familiar maternal instinct to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I'd spent too many years watching other parents enable destructive behavior with misplaced kindness. You stole from your mother, I said quietly. You used your knowledge of technology to exploit my trust. And when you realized I might discover what you'd done, you tried to discredit me by suggesting I was developing dementia. I never meant for it to go this far, she said through her fingers. It started with just one transfer when my rent was late. You had so much in your accounts, and I told myself you wouldn't even notice. Then I needed more, and more, and each time you told yourself you'd pay it back. She nodded miserably. I slid the final page across the table. This is a calculation of the total amount you've stolen, including the interest it would have earned in my investment accounts, plus the fees I've had to pay for account monitoring services since discovering the theft. The current total is $5,127.33. She looked at the number and began crying, not the calculated tears of someone trying to manipulate sympathy, but the raw, ugly, "Vivienne," I said. And she looked up at me with red, swollen eyes. "You have two choices. You can work with me to arrange a repayment plan that will take several years but won't destroy your credit further. Or I can file criminal charges for wire fraud and financial elder abuse." Her crying stopped abruptly. "You would actually send me to prison, if that's what it takes to prevent you from doing this to someone else?" Yes, she stared at me as if I were a stranger. Maybe I was. Maybe the mother she thought she knew. The confused, technologically challenged woman she could manipulate and dismiss had never existed outside her own assumptions. "What kind of repayment plan?" she asked finally. I opened my laptop and showed her a spreadsheet I'd prepared. Monthly payments of $400 for the next 15 months, plus 6% annual interest. You'll need to close your expensive apartment and find something you can actually afford. You'll need to get a second job or find additional income. And you'll need to attend financial counseling to address the spending patterns that created this situation. She studied the numbers. "That's going to be incredibly difficult." "Not as difficult as federal prison," I replied. She was quiet for a long time, staring at the repayment schedule. Finally she asked, "What about us? What about our relationship?" It was the question I'd been dreading most. "I don't know," I said honestly. "Trust isn't like a password. You can't just reset it when it's been compromised. You'll need to rebuild it over time, assuming I decide that's possible." "Mom, I know I screwed up, but I'm still your daughter." "No," I said, standing up from the table. "My daughter wouldn't have stolen from me. My daughter wouldn't have tried to convince her sister that I was losing my mind. My daughter would have come to me when she was in financial trouble instead of seeing me as a resource to exploit." She flinched as if I'd slapped her. "The person sitting in my dining room right now is someone who happens to share DNA with my daughter. Whether my daughter still exists somewhere inside you is something we'll discover over the next 15 months. I walked to the front door and opened it. "You have until tomorrow evening to decide whether you want the repayment plan or the criminal charges. Text me your decision. Don't call. I need time to process this conversation." She gathered her laptop and bag slowly, moving like someone who'd aged years in the past hour. At the door she turned back to me. "I really was going to pay it back," she said quietly. "I know you believe that," I replied. "The problem is believing something doesn't make it true, and good intentions don't undo the damage caused by bad actions." She left without another word. I closed the door behind her and engaged the deadbolt, then walked back to the dining room to clear away the evidence of our confrontation. My phone buzzed an hour later. A text from Vivienne. I accept the repayment plan. I'm sorry, Mom. I know that doesn't fix anything, but I needed to say it. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I called David Patterson to arrange the legal paperwork that would make our agreement binding. Then I called Rebecca to let her know what had happened. Jesus, Mom, Rebecca said after I'd explained everything. How are you holding up? I'm not sure yet, I admitted. Part of me feels vindicated. I wasn't the confused old woman she thought I was, but part of me feels like I just lost a daughter. You didn't lose her, Rebecca said firmly. You found out who she really was. There's a difference, and maybe now that she knows she can't manipulate you, she'll have to become someone worth being your daughter again. Over the following weeks, I established the repayment system with military precision: automatic transfers, documented receipts, monthly statements showing progress toward the total. Vivienne made her first payment on time, along with a brief email confirming her new, cheaper apartment and second job at a coffee shop. The financial counseling sessions were apparently going well, according to the monthly report she sent me. She was learning to live within her means for the first time in her adult life, a skill that should have been taught years earlier, but somehow got lost in all that technological superiority. 3 months into our arrangement, she sent a longer email, not asking for forgiveness exactly, but acknowledging the full scope of what she'd done: the manipulation, the gaslighting, the calculated exploitation of my trust. She was beginning to understand that her actions had been about more than money. They'd been about power and control, and the assumption that being younger made her automatically smarter. I still haven't decided whether our relationship can be repaired. Some betrayals cut too deep to heal completely. But I've learned something important about myself. At 70 years old, I'm not the helpless, confused victim that people assume elderly women must be. I'm a woman who built a successful business, raised 2 children mostly on her own, and mastered every piece of technology she needed to protect herself and her assets. When someone tried to exploit my age and perceived technological limitations, I didn't just adapt, I outmaneuvered them completely. The yellow roses in my garden are blooming again this spring. Charles planted them when Vivienne was born, and I've maintained them ever since. Every year I decide whether to keep them or plant something new. This year I'm keeping them, not because they represent the daughter I thought I had, but because they represent the mother I discovered I still am, strong enough to tend what deserves tending, and strong enough to uproot what doesn't. Vivienne has 11 months left on her repayment plan. Whether she has longer than that as my daughter depends entirely on choices she makes going forward. But regardless of what she chooses, I know exactly who I am now. I'm not outdated. I'm not technologically illiterate. I'm not a confused old woman who needs her children to manage her life. I'm Eleanor Whitmore, and I'm nobody's victim. The roses will bloom whether she deserves to see them or not, but they'll bloom either way, because I'm the one who tends the garden now, and I always have been.